check the mic works well. Okay. So yeah, if you just want to maybe introduce yourself and then just start, however you want to go into it is fine. I can edit away or
Okay.
however you feel comfortable.
All right. Well, my name is Eric Vaught, and I'm the commander of the Lawrence County Sheriff's Auxiliary. And our motto is Per Ardua Liberis, which means that freedom is maintained through adversity. We were started under Sheriff Brad DeLay in February of 2012. And a lot of what we do is response to both Katrina and the Joplin events and a greater need for resources under the Sheriff's Office to respond to disasters within the community. And a lot of that comes from the idea that it's better to have people from the community providing those needs than bringing people from outside unless it's absolutely necessary, and making sure that the local responders are under control of the response and under the care for their own neighbors. So our primary purpose is then disaster response and turning out for the community in order to help people that need it. And we're actually commissioned officers, and we have enlisted as well underneath the sheriff. We're not peace officers, we're not law enforcement, but we do come under the category of a public safety officer, I guess is the correct term. The secondary goals of our organization involved getting more people directly involved with law enforcement, civilians and regular citizens aware of what law enforcement is doing in their community, able to provide feedback, giving the sheriff an idea of what the citizens' concerns are, connecting them up with neighborhood watches, all of that sort of stuff, what I refer to as locals in the loop law enforcement. And then a additional secondary concern was the fact that the county sheriff is kind of one of the bastions of liberty in our country and our system of government. They're the chief elected law enforcement official in most people's communities, and they're responsible for service of process, for providing a lot of the checks and balances against other levels of government operating within that community. The Sheriff's Auxiliary gives the local sheriff a little bit more resources in being able to accomplish that job as well, and a little bit more legitimacy in the accomplishment of that objective, because he's bringing in citizens from the community to actually help accomplish that purpose. What else do you want me to go into?
Is there any? Can you maybe do like a statement where? I mean, it was clear to me, like, listen to what you're saying, like, why it could be beneficial for, like, a sheriff's department to want to have a program like this, or for, like, people who care about police accountability, but even just, like, a summary sort of, like, statement, like, I know, like, if I were a sheriff, or it seems like our sheriff appreciates having this because of these reasons, or, I mean, just to try to, like, make it, it sounds like it's beneficial to all the other parties involved, but just to... Sort of a summary.
Okay, so why would the sheriff want to do this? One of the main reasons is honestly that a lot of law enforcement departments these days, or actually as our sheriff tries to emphasize office, is that budgets are very tight. There's simply not enough money to go around to have deputies and reserve deputies on staff in order to cover both emergency unanticipated needs and routine needs. The response to the Joplin event, for instance, required deputies from 13 counties, possibly 14, I forget the exact number, going to Joplin to help out there, and that made them shorthanded in their own counties. They couldn't do patrols, they couldn't handle routine matters back on the home turf. And volunteers are an obvious way of handling that. That's something that is also a tradition from the founding of our company, of our country, that is the way that our communities are supposed to respond to that, is people turn out and volunteer to serve their neighbors.
Do you have any message for folks who might be interested in, like, sort of replicating this, like what lessons you've learned, or like just a motivation, like sort of pitch for someone else to, if they think this may be worth doing in their area?
Well, I think the first piece of advice for somebody that wants to start this is that it is an undertaking. It's definitely a very significant time commitment. It's not something you're going to go out in a couple weekends and get this done. The volunteers require a significant amount of training. They have to invest a lot of time. And we're trying ourselves to document a lot of the stuff as we go, both in order to kind of keep on the level with our own operation, but also to help somebody else follow in our footsteps and see what problems we encountered and how we solved it, what things worked and what things did not. One of the things that is definitely one of the obstacles that we faced is that there really aren't any citizens and auxiliaries functioning in the United States that are approaching the problem the way that we are and had the requirements that our sheriff gave us for the program. So we had to invent a lot of things from scratch, in particular figuring out what the appropriate level of training was. You've got a definite balance between the need for a volunteer force, that they can't spend 700 hours on their own dime to do this for free, and yet they have to have a requisite level of training that they're not going to be a danger to themselves and others in a disaster. So you definitely have to try to strike that balance to get people that are competent. One of the models that I actually used is I went back to Colonel Ephraim Ellsworth. Was back in the 1820s, he started a movement called the Zouave militia companies. And they had militias back then, but he started a process of not just having people that are volunteers that can do the job, but can be the darn best volunteer company possible. And he created what were essentially the Special Forces, or SWAT, of his day, that were all volunteer companies from the ground up. And he left a lot of documentation on how he went about doing that, and what not just the mechanical requirements of doing that, the organizational requirements, but kind of the social concerns of how to support the volunteers in the community and how to interact with society and responsibility. So that's one of the models that I look back to. Actually, that was a suggestion I got from a Marine colonel probably 15 years ago, that Ephraim Ellsworth's work was critical to successful citizen auxiliaries in our country, and it's something that I completely ignored until I was handed responsibility for that organization, and then went and started looking things up and figuring out what it was all about.
Nice. What would you say, like, where do you hope to be in a few years with the auxiliary in Lawrence, or like even in the larger sphere, like you know, in terms of the police culture, or you know, I guess, are you optimistic about the trajectory of things, and, you know, particularly with if more of these sorts of programs get started or other things happen?
Well, actually, yeah, I'm extremely optimistic. I expected there to be a lot more obstacles to what we're trying to do, and I expected it to be much harder to get people to understand what we're trying to do and get them on board and committing their time and resources. And that was entirely not the case. It also took some work to get used to working under this particular sheriff and what his expectations was, and how to please him in the program, but that was much easier than I expected. I think that in several years we'll probably be a fairly going concern in Lawrence County. I expect to have probably dozens of volunteers at that point active in the community. And I also expect that we'll probably have satellite counties doing the same thing at that point. We had an emergency radio course that we offered in November of last year, that we had 28 people from 7 counties show up because there's that much interest in what we're doing and how we're going about it. So I think there's a lot of excitement in doing this, and I think it fulfills a very important purpose that we're currently missing in this country.
Cool. Do you want to plug your site, or like how folks can get in touch with you if they have questions, maybe?
Okay. The easiest way to find out about us is to go to the website, which is lcmoauxiliary.org, and auxiliary is spelled with one L. That's something actually I went to register the website, and I almost spelled it wrong in the registration. So that's something that's easy to mistake. But there's our mission statement is online. There's a lot of documents on there about what we're doing. And I'm also putting a lot of information about our training and our courses that we're developing in-house online there as well, so that people can go to that and get a start on doing it in their own counties. I'm also willing to go to nearby counties and talk to folks, including local citizens and sheriffs, and our sheriff has also expressed that he's willing to travel a bit to talk to people about what we're doing, and so definitely get a hold of me if you have an interest in doing this.
Cool. All right. You think there's anything we haven't covered that you want to cover? I'm just trying to think of questions folks may have. Kathy, do you have any thing you think we should?
Oh no, he's the public face.
Yeah.
I run around and do everything else.
And there's enough material that I could fill hours
I hear you, man.
and do,
I hear
but
you.
I don't think that's what you want at the
It's pretty
moment.
solid, yeah.
So